We are in for a long haul on this, in which he is blamed for anything that happens in New York.
Fox News' reaction is very predictable. How mainstream outlets grapple with this is also interesting. And I think clearly he's making the establishment left very uncomfortable. And I think that they're finally coming to terms with the fact that the people that are authentic and have progressive views are actually the stars of the party.
Welcome to Power Lines, presented this week by Beehive. I'm John Pasentino.
And I'm Oliver Darcy.
Today, MAGA world is boiling over after Tucker Carlson's interview with a noted white nationalist. Netflix is making a big play into podcasting with its rivalry with YouTube. Jon Stewart has signed on for another year at Comedy Central, extending his reign on The Daily Show. But first, Oliver, this week, Zohran Mamdani has won the New York City mayoral election. A pretty incredible moment Tuesday night. If you were watching on television, if you were watching on Fox News in particular, they were completely melting down over this. In some ways, I think that they're actually a little bit happy. This gives them something to get excited about on the air. They used the moment to condemn socialism, communism, really go all in on this. We're here in LA this week, you and I.
Seeking safe harbor.
Refugees.
It's very scary in New York right now. Very scary.
Everything that I'm hearing is that it's already descended into a dystopian apocalypse. But
people are scared. People are scared right now.
Well, so Sean Hannity has been telling his viewers that people are really nervous about this, including his rich friends who are apparently afraid of what is to come now in New York. What do you make of this whole situation?
Well, it's interesting on the Sean Hannity front. Like, if you're watching Fox News, it seems like the end of New York has happened, which is strange because if you've been watching Fox News for the last 5 years, you think New York was already an apocalypse.
Right.
So I guess it's going to descend further into a dystopian apocalypse with Mamdani having won. But Sean Hannity was on the air saying that his friends are scared, they're nervous, they're terrified, apparently, of what New York City is going to become.
I honestly feel bad. I have friends of mine in New York. My phone is blowing up. They are officially depressed and scared. And as Martha pointed out earlier, a full 9% of people say that they will leave. If he in fact got elected before today, they said if he got elected, they're going to leave New York City.
And it's remarkable because I'm assuming Sean Hannity's friends are pretty well off.
Right.
And they're we were talking about this before the show. They portray themselves as big tough guys. And they're nervous about Mamdani having won.
It's the free buses. It's the potential grocery stores that the city might have with affordable food. I can only imagine how scary that must be for them. But it's happening on Fox. We're seeing their opinion hosts just go all in on this. It's also happening across the right-wing media space. Megyn Kelly on her show, mocking, Mamdani. But also between her, Steve Bannon, and others, also using this as a moment to attack, people who are of the Muslim faith, and really going after Mamdani on that front. I think it was Steve Bannon who suggested that he be deported. Megyn Kelly saying that he, people who are of the Islam faith should not be in leadership positions in this country. I mean, this is like a very thinly veiled, if you even want to call it that, Islamophobic freak out on the right now as well. And I think that they're freaking out in part because he was so successful at getting his message out, right? He's very Obama-esque in a way, where he's come from a very small corner, let's say, of the party and risen to now national fame. I mean, the entire country is looking at this race and how he catapulted into that by using the media in a particular way, by taking his message directly to people on social media. And I think that the sort of MAGA space that supported Trump and his populist view are looking at this and saying, oh man, he's kind of figured out a very smart playbook here. And they're using everything they can to go after him. What do you think?
I think they're otherizing him, which is normally what happens when someone that doesn't look like a clean-cut white man wins office. And there are making him seem like, he's the other person. He's Muslim, he's brown. I mean, I was thinking when I was watching the election speech after he won, the music that played, it was, I'm Middle Eastern. It sounded like Middle Eastern music, but it probably was blowing minds, over at Fox News headquarters that someone would play that music after winning an election. And I think that, they are very much painting him as an anti-American force who has seized power in New York City, and he's a communist and he doesn't share American values. And to some extent, Zohran talked about this when he actually delivered his acceptance speech, right? And I think we have that clip where he talks about a prism of misinformation, or how people have absorbed his campaign through this distorted lens.
Now I know that many have heard our message only through the prism of misinformation. Tens of millions of dollars have been spent to redefine reality and to convince our neighbors that this new age is something that should frighten them.
And I think he's onto something there when he talks about how people consume the election. If you were watching Fox News, if you're listening to these right-wing podcasts, you saw a very different Mamdani than if you were watching his own social clips, if you're watching progressive media. And he has been very much villainized as a boogeyman in these corners of the world. And people are like, I think legitimately, when Sean Hannity says that his friends are scared, I think there are people who are legitimately scared because he has been portrayed as this monster, effectively, who's come into New York City, and they are nervous. The interesting thing is, like, their priorities seem way out of whack. Like, the free buses are scaring them more than the president of the United States, who is currently taking a hammer or a baseball bat to all our institutions. But the free buses are terrifying.
Right. Yeah. And I think that for Fox, though, even though, and for right-wing media, even though they support like a Curtis Sliwa type candidate, right, who is on the right, who New York is never going to, I mean, I can't imagine them electing somebody like that. By seeing someone like Zohran Mamdani win this race, who they can openly vilify all the time, it is very much going to be a playground for them going forward now, to constantly use him to attack and distract from the real issues that are actually happening around the country. People who live outside of New York know Zohran Mamdani in part because his message has been so well crafted. He's always been on message about how challenging it is to afford anything in 2025 America, right? Affordability is this massive problem that's not a New York only issue, right? And we're here in LA today, and affordability is probably the number one issue affecting people here today as well. And I think he's been really smart, but these, the MAGA media is going to use him in the same way they did with Barack Obama, which is that anything that is going on in the right-wing space, any issues that are going on in the conservative world, we're going to just go all in distraction mode on Mamdani. And I think for them, this is actually going to be a win for them in a sort of counterintuitive way, and that now they're going to have someone to talk about endlessly to distract from what Donald Trump is really doing, from what ICE is doing around the country, and the frankly, the civil war that's breaking out in MAGA right now. Now they have the perfect thing to pivot away from that and to go off on how he wants to have affordable housing in New York. Dear God, that would be terrible.
And we should say too, it's not just Fox News that's like freaking out or bashing Mamdani. I watched the victory speech in my hotel room here in LA over on MSNBC. And then I was curious, the MSNBC crowd very much celebrated the electrifying speech and talked about how a new generation of, progressivism is being ushered in, and he's delivering that message. And then I switched over to CNN, and the entire panel basically just bashed him. We have a clip of that as well, some clips of that.
I think he missed an opportunity. I think the Mamdani that we saw on the campaign trail, who was a lot more calm, who was a lot warmer, who was a lot more embracing, was not present in that speech. I think he missed a chance tonight to open up and bring more people into the tent. I think his tone was sharp.
I agree with everything that Van said about that speech. I was disappointed by it because this was his big introduction to the city as the new mayor.
And I think this was a divisive speech, and he clearly sees the world in terms of the people who are oppressing you and the oppressed. And he said the oppressed are now in City Hall.
And you see that it's not just Scott Jennings who immediately, predictably did not find anything he liked from the Mamdani speech, but it's David Axelrod, it's Van Jones even saying that he was striking the wrong notes. And I watched the speech, and I thought it felt very Obama-esque. I thought it was a very youthful speech, one that was very energizing. And, then when I did turn on CNN, it just felt like these very older, an older generation felt very stiff, and they looked very out of touch. And I was also struck by the fact that the CNN panel didn't seem to have really anyone on there who was giving the Mamdani perspective. They paid Scott Jennings just to give out BS MAGA talking points all day long. And it felt like there was no representation of the young progressive wing on that panel.
Yeah, I saw some of that myself. I was surprised that Van Jones used his the Mamdani's acceptance speech, which I think was actually kind of soaring in many ways, like you said, and correctly said that many people don't really know who I am and don't really know of me other than through a distorted prism that they have viewed all of me and my speeches or, my positions through. And I was surprised that Van Jones then used that to say that he was screaming and all that. If you've ever been into a political rally or a celebratory room like that, it's very loud. So I can only imagine too that you're not even clear on how loud you are speaking into a microphone in real time. So you might come across maybe a little excited. You did just win, by the way.
Against all odds.
Right.
Against literally all odds. And the people that were on that panel were probably saying that, a year ago, we're dismissive of his campaign.
Right.
And so he wins against all odds, and he comes out there and delivers a defiant victory speech, which, I would expect him to deliver as well, and delivers a blunt message to Donald Trump, basically saying, if you want to come here with ICE, you got to get through all of us. And he directly looked into the camera and told Donald Trump, turn up the volume, because he was delivering a message directly to him through the cameras. And, again, I thought it was a speech that really was very youthful and energetic and electrifying, and even regardless of the politics of it all, just like the way it was delivered. And it was just striking to me then to go to this quiet set where you have a bunch of, old-time political analysts who are just ripping the guy.
Yeah, there's definitely a generational gap, right? Mamdani's in his 30s. He's a millennial or Gen Z. I don't know. He might be on the sort of
34, so I think he's a millennial.
Yeah. He's on the younger end of being a millennial. Yeah, there's definitely a generational gap on that. And it is kind of striking how in that moment, a really big moment, right? New York's first Muslim mayor, the first democratic socialist in 100 years, I believe, and using that to portray him in a sort of negative light. It's kind of surprising. But I also think that we are in for a long haul on this in for the next 4 years, in which he is blamed for anything that happens in New York. I mean, you and I have been joking about this for a while, but anytime a police officer is harmed in New York City, we've already seen those on the right blame Mamdani for this. And you're like, wait a minute, he hasn't even won the race, let alone taken office. And it's already his fault or already his problem. Forget Eric Adams, the current mayor, who's, current train wreck. But I think that for right-wing media, this is going to be fantastic for them, even though they're going to go out every day and attack him for it. It's going to whip up the red meat for their base. They're going to love this stuff. And you can imagine from here on out, Hannity, Laura Ingraham and co., they're going to have so much to talk about every night and keep their base whipped up. But and use him to portray that this is where the left is going in America. They're the extremists. They want to bring socialism and communism into this country, and we have to do everything to fight back against that.
Yeah, and I would bet that New York is not going to. It's going to be fine.
It's already fallen, Oliver.
It's going to be
kidding?
fine.
That's why we're here.
I bet most people would not know if you parachuted a year later into New York and you didn't know that Zohran was mayor, that a socialist communist has taken over New York City, I think everyone's going to be fine. But on certain channels, I'm sure it's going to be portrayed as an apocalypse, which it has been portrayed for several years as this crime-ridden hellhole. And I do think, though, what's interesting is Fox News' reaction is very predictable, but how mainstream outlets grapple with this is also interesting. And I think that the CNN freak out over Mamdani winning and the bashing of his speech is reflective of the fact that he does disrupt the status quo. And that is what you're seeing, with that CNN panel reaction. It's that he has not only does he sort of terrify the right, but he also, I think, worries Democrats. I mean, you saw that in the run up to the election, like Hakeem Jeffries refused basically until the very last minute to endorse him. Chuck Schumer, when he cast his ballot, I don't think he even, as he said, who he voted for, the New York senator. And so clearly he's making the left, the establishment left, very uncomfortable. And I think that they're finally coming to terms with the fact that the AOCs of the world, the Mamdanis of the world, even Bernie Sanders, the people that are authentic and have progressive views are actually the stars of the party. And the Chuck Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries, I don't know what the plural version of that is, but they're not. They're not. That's not where the energy is. And I think that terrifies a lot of them as well. Yeah,
it sure does. All right. Well, we'll see how this goes. I'm really
we make it back to New York because the shutdown. We both got notices that our flights might be impacted by the fact that we can't apparently in this country pay air traffic controllers.
We might have to hunker down here for a while. I'm genuinely not sure we're going to make our flights out of here.
We're going to say.
All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to discuss the MAGA civil war that continues to rage after Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on his show for what could only be described as a chummy interview.
Let me take a quick minute to tell you about the platform we use to run Status. It's called Beehive, and I've got a special offer for readers coming up. But first, here's a little background on why Beehive was right for Status. When I started this newsletter, I needed a platform that could grow with us, something powerful enough for serious publishers, but simple enough to build without a large team of engineers or designers.
That's exactly what we found with Beehive. It was built by the same team behind Morning Brew, so they understand what it takes to grow an audience and build a real business around your work. Since launching, two things have made a huge difference. First, our newsletter actually reaches people because the deliverability is outstanding. We don't really have to worry about spam filters anymore. Second, the paid subscription setup is incredibly easy. This is where you can charge for access to your newsletter. Beehive handles payments, subscriber management, all of it. That lets us stay focused on the journalism while the platform turns our work into a sustainable business.
Whether you're an independent writer or running a larger publication, Beehive gives you everything in one place. A clean editor, a website for your publication, powerful growth tools like referrals and recommendations, and multiple ways to make money from day one. If you're thinking about starting a newsletter or switching platforms, Beehive is offering Status readers 30% off your first 3 months with code STATUS30.
Visit beehive.com/status. That's BEEHIIV.com/status and start building your newsletter today.
Welcome back. So this week, the MAGA civil war over Tucker Carlson's interview with white nationalist Nick Fuentes, the Hitler-loving white supremacist, unavowed in all this. It just continues to implode. Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire host, did a full 45 minutes on his show this week, a full takeover just to dive into this whole situation, really lighting into Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. Here's what he said.
And Americans are not pro-Putin, pro-Iran, pro-China, pro-Venezuela, pro-Hamas, pro-Fuentes, pro-Tate idiots like Tucker Carlson. It is not cancellation to refuse to signal boost Hitler's supporters like Nick Fuentes. It is not cancellation to criticize Tucker Carlson for rhetorically fluffing Nick Fuentes and other anti-American crackpots. The issue here isn't that Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes on his show last week. He has every right to do that, of course. The issue here is that Tucker Carlson decided to normalize and fluff Nick Fuentes, and that the Heritage Foundation then decided to robustly defend that performance. Those who criticize both Tucker and Heritage aren't canceling, they are quite properly drawing a moral line.
In many ways, I think Ben Shapiro is really smart here. He showed in Nick Fuentes' own words what it is that he's putting out into this space. Oliver, you saw this yourself as well. I think it's a pretty remarkable moment right now where pretty much everyone in the right-wing media, MAGA media verse is taking sides in this, and it's really ripping people apart.
We finally found the line that finally gets people to say Tucker Carlson has gone too far.
Yeah, I mean, for now, I don't know.
It took getting to Hitler-loving guests to finally say, hey, that's like, it's not good.
Yeah.
Sort of. Even the Heritage president, though, initially defended it. So that's how lost, I think, on the moral grounds the right is at this point. But this has divided the conservative movement for sure.
It has. And now we're seeing like the repercussion phase of all of this. So this week, as you mentioned, Heritage President Kevin Roberts, who without prompt went out and published this video. It landed on X and other social platforms defending Tucker Carlson's decision to bring Nick Fuentes on his show. That really just exploded into controversy. This was last week. Now he's walking that back entirely. He met with the staff of the Heritage Foundation. The Washington Free Beacon got a copy of this video at an all hands this week where he apologized, says, full stop, I take the blame for this. I should have never gone out and defended this. This only comes, though, after he took a ton of heat within the Heritage Foundation, which is, the premier conservative think tank. They're the group behind the Project 2025 campaign that Donald Trump has used as a playbook, even after denying it, for his own administration. This is a really big deal. Now he's just saying, look, I totally screwed this up. And his own staff is just giving it to him. This video that the Free Beacon obtained and published shows their own staff pushing back on him, saying, I don't think you're the right man for this job. He offered to resign over this whole issue, which, again, this is a huge moment that the head of the Heritage Foundation would offer to quit because he supported Tucker Carlson. It's quite a moment. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it was a remarkable moment, John, watching the Heritage staff just light up their president. I think we have a few clips of that.
And the issue here is Tucker Carlson. And I think, Mr. President, you don't understand the post-fact Fox Tucker Carlson. If you're not watching the interview with Daryl Cooper or Nick Fuentes, if you don't watch Nick Fuentes online, you don't know what's going on here.
We watched this sort of incoherent defense for days of, well, we can't participate in cancel culture, and anyone who attacks Tucker is participating in cancel culture, but also we're going to attack the people who are participating in that cancel culture, and that's not cancel culture. And sir, maybe I'm just a simple human, but there's not enough grass that I can touch to make that make sense.
We've been told that our principles haven't changed, just some of the policies have changed. But if our policies directly contradict our principles, then either our principles have changed or we have no principles. Kevin, you are winsome and you have always been kind to me, but I do not believe that you are the right person to lead the Heritage Foundation.
Not every day that the Heritage president just gets destroyed by his staff. And I thought a number of things he said during this, this moment, this speech, this town hall with his staff were remarkable. But the one thing that caught my eye was the fact that he said the Heritage president, who is like kind of the guy who defines what conservatism is, should really know all the players and the key tenets of conservatism and like what's going on the right, says feigns ignorance about Nick Fuentes. I don't really know who this guy is. Like, you don't know who this guy is? Are you not paying any attention to what's happening on the right? You're the Heritage Foundation president. And he says he didn't know who he was when he recorded the video, which is like, okay, well then maybe why did you record the video? Are you just stupid? Like, do you have no judgment whatsoever? And then afterward, he says he still really doesn't know who he is.
Right.
So this controversy that has engulfed the entire conservative movement, that has engulfed him in controversy, ensnared him in controversy, he hasn't had the time apparently to Google who Nick Fuentes is and just figure out what it is. He should probably watch the Ben Shapiro episode. It's not hard to do this, but he's still I don't know who this guy is. I thought that was the most remarkable thing to say. I mean, it shows to me that he's not even still taking this very seriously.
No, and if you watch what he told his staff, he explained away this whole controversy, taking some responsibility for it, but then also blaming and throwing under the bus his what is now former chief of staff who has resigned over this whole issue, saying that he told me that we had put together a script for me to go on camera and defend Tucker Carlson over this. I was under the impression that this was the right thing to do and that everyone in this room, including key leadership of Heritage, was on board with that. And I was misled by him. And he's a good man, he says. But he is the reason why I went out and did this. And so now I'm here apologizing for it.
By the way, these are the same people who said that Biden didn't know what he was doing and his staff was running the government. Sounds like the Heritage Foundation president doesn't know what he's doing and his staff is running the think tank.
No, it's clearly not. He went on to explain, too, that he doesn't really watch the news much. He doesn't listen to podcasts. He's a big sports fan. He spends time when he's not working.
This guy shouldn't be president of the Heritage Foundation.
I had the same reaction and was like, I'm not sure that
Dude's
Kevin
in the wrong
Roberts
business.
is well equipped in this moment to lead an organization like that's picking sides in a hyper partisan and very media centric conservative movement at this moment, when he doesn't have time to watch the news or listen to podcasts, and yet is going out there and defending in this case, a gigantic star on the right, Tucker Carlson, right? If not the biggest star on the right at this moment, who, sure, everybody knows who that is and used to be even much more mainstream on Fox, but continues to pull the party into more radical and extreme positions. And this Fuentes interview, it begs the question of, did you even watch it? It's possible to not know who he was, which is frightening for somebody like who's running Heritage. But did you even watch this thing before you went out there and took a hard stance and condemned others? And the position he's saying here, and a lot of conservatives I've seen take this position, is we are not for canceling people. I don't think we should be canceling people of any viewpoint. They should all have an opportunity to air their positions on issues. But is that still the case if it's talking about, it's truly hateful rhetoric.
Not for canceling Nazis.
Right. Talking about the Holocaust and talking about how this is 6 million cookies who were in the oven. It's really disgusting stuff. And then saying that number's probably fabricated and made up. There's no way that happened. Is that what Republicans are going to stand for now? We want to make sure that guys like him can have a fair shake on YouTube and go on Tucker Carlson's show. And the thing is, Carlson knows how to give an absolute grilling. When Ted Cruz went on his show this year, he made a joke of him. He embarrassed him by asking him somewhat sneaky, questions about Iran's population that honestly, I'm not sure how many people know the answers to that. But Carlson knows what he's doing.
Yep.
And so it's a remarkable moment. And we see others taking sides, including like Megyn Kelly, who seems like she's trying to stay out of it.
Yeah, she likes to be friends with Tucker and take no positions on the, really heinous things that Tucker does these days. And
she calls him a friend, and we don't want to betray our friendships.
Oh, it's totally remarkable because there's no way anyone else would get this sort of treatment. It's just like she just has a blind eye for Tucker Carlson. If people on the left were hosting Nazis or whatever, and then imagine if a
pro-jihadist, right, wants to come on and have a softball interview on some lefty show. Could you imagine the freak out?
Yeah, and then Rachel Maddow talks to the host afterward and just doesn't address it. I think Megyn Kelly would be pretty fired up about that. But no, and she's taking pictures with Tucker Carlson and his dogs this week and just hanging out with him.
Is she really?
Yeah, really.
What kind of dogs does he have?
He has a couple dogs. He always travels with them, and I find it there's a whole thing about how some of the worst people in the world hide behind cute little dogs,
right,
and try to humanize themselves by surrounding themselves with animals. But that's another topic. I do think what's really interesting about this story is it's sort of on the lines of canceling, and how the right is really refused to do that. It seems finally like some people on the right have realized that the idea of platforming people with dangerous views is not a good idea, right? And so this was a huge debate during COVID where a lot of, vaccine kooks were platformed and they're like, oh, well, we're not, we should listen to everyone. like the idea, like they're free speech, right? Like ideas aren't dangerous. Like, you know, like we can allow everyone on the platforms, and they should certainly not be banned. And why are you trying to cancel? Now we're seeing parts of the right be like, actually, like there are forms of speech that are dangerous that do not deserve to be platformed to large audiences. And so I think it presents an issue for them. Like, okay, you acknowledge finally like that Nazis shouldn't be on the platform. Well, if Nazi speech is dangerous, which it is, well, what about speech that might misinform people about the safety of vaccines and the reason that we have vaccines? Like, is that not dangerous speech? Like, there is a recognition finally that the people with big platforms have a responsibility when they have these platforms to, you know, have on guests who are not spewing hate or saying dangerous things to large audiences. And finally, it seems like there's an acknowledgement by the Ben Shapiros of the world that that's the case. Like, yes, no one's ever been like, you know, that, you know, some anti-vaccine kook can't walk on the street and say whatever he wants or, you know, whatever. That's free speech. But does that person belong on Joe Rogan's show getting a softball interview? That's the question. That's always been the question. And finally, we're hearing that maybe there are people on the right that think that there is some form of speech.
There is a line. There is eventually a line there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carlson himself, though, seems to be acknowledging that he went a little too far in this interview. He's went on another comedian's podcast recently this week and said that he apologized and was sorry for the way that he had attacked, quote unquote, Christian Zionists on the show, because he was agreeing with Nick Fuentes at one point about how Christian Zionists have like brain worms and that they're actually the enemies, and that this belief among conservatives in America that we have to defend Israel, that Israel is a force for good, is totally bonkers and has brain-wormed people in the Republican Party. And that really pissed a lot of people off. So he went on this other show this week and apologized for that, but notably did not apologize for bringing or express any real regret about having Nick Fuentes on his show and offering his millions of followers a real gateway into, frankly, the most extreme rhetoric you're going to find.
I texted Carlson and I asked him some version of this, and he said he didn't. Oh, I asked him what he thought about Ben Shapiro. Tucker's told me that he hadn't seen it and isn't going to watch it.
That's like the famous way to dodge.
I'm sure Tucker Carlson hasn't seen it.
Like every time Mike Johnson is on camera and asked about a crazy unhinged Donald Trump thing, I haven't seen it. Right after this, I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, like, I'm sure that like in 2025, when everyone's glued to their phones, no one's seen anything.
Right.
So anyway, but he's trying to dismiss Shapiro, and this has been a long-standing, you know, feud between the two, but it's finally boiled over. And, you know, frankly, Ben Shapiro is on much higher ground than Tucker Carlson is, and is honest when he says that Tucker's not intellectually honest. He's kind of a bad dude, and this isn't the guy who should be guiding the conservative movement.
All right, when we come back, Netflix is getting big into podcasts in their rivalry with YouTube. Jon Stewart has been renewed for another year on Comedy Central. And what is Marjorie Taylor Greene doing on The View? We'll be back. Welcome back. So, Oliver, this week, Jon Stewart was signed for another year of his contract at Comedy Central. There'd been a lot of questions and scrutiny over whether or not this deal was going to happen. Paramount, as everybody knows now, was recently just bought out by David Ellison and via his father, Larry. Lots of money, but they've very obviously turned the network to the right, hiring Barry Weiss and notably ending, right, Stephen Colbert's show on CBS, The Late Show. People are really upset about that. That's ending next year. But there'd been total silence around whether or not Jon Stewart was going to get another deal. So we found out this week they struck a deal for one more year. So he'll stick around on The Daily Show, hosting it on Mondays, executive produce the rest of it with the rest of the staff. Great show. I really enjoy actually that show these days. Feels like it's become actually very relevant once again in 2025, which has been a lot of fun. But you had some reporting behind the scenes on how this actually came together.
Well, you'll remember over the summer, I went to the Paramount press conference and I ended up having lunch to some extent with George Cheeks. For people who don't know who George Cheeks is, He's the head of Paramount Television now. So all the networks report to him, and that includes Comedy Central. And I asked George Cheeks at this lunch, like, are you going to renew Jon Stewart? What's going on there? And he didn't have an answer. He said, basically stay tuned. And there was no firm answer one way or another. It turns out that this renewal deal got done pretty, in the last few weeks. So early October, there is this meeting between George Cheeks, Jon Stewart, and Jon Stewart's agent, Baby Doll. So it was what he's known in the industry as. And this agent represents all the big comedians, Colbert, Kimmel, Jon Stewart. And they have this meeting, and over the next 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, they hammer out a deal and they get it done. And I think it was important for a couple of reasons. One, it allows Paramount to be like, look, we're like at least signaling some independence from the Trump administration. We're not doing everything that he likes. Look, we got South Park, which is just, incinerating Donald Trump on a weekly basis, right? And then we got Jon Stewart renewed. And I think that's important because we just saw incredible backlash to ABC briefly suspending Jimmy Kimmel. And you can imagine that after installing Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief of CBS News, after putting that conservative ombudsman at CBS News, after ending the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, after all these decisions that have pushed the company in a pro-Trump direction, or at least friendlier waters to Donald Trump, that if they got rid of Jon Stewart in this moment, there would have been hell to pay. People would have been pissed, and it would have inspired a huge public relations nightmare for Paramount. It would have been covered on the press for days that they're capitulating yet again to Donald Trump. And I would guess, just seeing that after Disney briefly suspended Kimmel, that resulted in millions of cancellations to Disney Plus. I would bet that people would have started canceling Paramount. And I don't think that David Ellison and his executive team in this moment, as they're trying to actually rebuild this platform, want to deal with that. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. I mean, we saw a tsunami that washed over Disney, millions of subscribers canceling. And I can't imagine they want something like that as well. But also, it's a difficult case to make that Stewart is not performing well for them. I mean, the show has delivered fantastic ratings for them. Obviously, fewer people are watching linear cable television these days, but the show is doing really well in the ratings.
To play devil's advocate, Colbert's show was number one, and they ended that show.
Yeah. I mean, it was number one until the Jimmy Kimmel disaster, and I think he's been number one since, or, in some version of number one in the ratings. It's easy to manipulate those numbers. But I do think that it would be a really difficult... and so Stewart has come out. He was interviewed by David Remnick at the New Yorker Festival, and he said, I wanted this deal to happen, right? It was just sort of like, can we actually make it work out? At the festival, though, he also spoke about Joe Rogan and his place in the podcasting universe. Let's play this clip.
There are right-wing, weaponized commentators whose sole purpose is to manipulate things to the benefit of the Bannon Project or the Project 2025. Rogan's not that guy.
What is that guy? How would you describe
that guy? Is a curious comic who fell into this thing that got fucking enormous, maybe doesn't, has opinions all over the political spectrum, but has tendencies that people on the left does not fit the aesthetic. He's a hunter.
In fairness, he's had people on who are kind of Nazi curious. That's not good.
I've interviewed Kissinger. And he was carpet bomb curious. I don't know what to say. It's very easy to castigate those where we're but he had an opinion a few years back that's, corrosive.
But the difference is when he was carpet bomb curious, you didn't say, oh yeah, that's awesome. And what happens with Rogan sometimes is he'll hear somebody that's on the dangerous end of the spectrum, and he'll just kind of soak it in.
And this is, I think this is a great point. And it's whoever job who thinks that information is dangerous, to fight to get their point of view out there, to counter what they think is misinformation. You can't just deputize people to say he should have known better and he should have prosecuted that point.
But the reality is, John, is that it might be my job or the New York Times job or even your job, but I don't have the audience that Joe Rogan does.
Then get it.
Yeah,
then find
get
people
it.
who do. Then go on that show. then do those things. Like it's not acceptable to just say, well, I don't like what he does. Then do it better, beat them at their own game. It's not enough to just complain that guy got a platform and don't platform that guy. There's no one in this world right now that isn't platformed.
So kind of some surprising remarks from Jon Stewart there on Joe Rogan's responsibility as a podcaster. I mean, he is, the largest or one of the largest voices now in the online podcasting media space. And I'm kind of surprised that Stewart sort of washes the responsibility off of him here. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, in Spider-Man, they say like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
I think there's like, with a great platform comes also great responsibility. And Joe Rogan wields his platform in very irresponsible ways by mainstreaming people like Alex Jones, anti-vax conspiracy theorists, and just, all sorts of, he flirts with a lot of these radical figures in American politics today and brings them to large audiences who turn to him for information. And I think he legitimizes them. And I think that's not the responsible way to wield your platform, especially, I thought, during COVID, when, it was really life or death for a lot of people. And he was bringing on these vaccine people, and saying, well, they're saying it's not safe.
Right.
And at sometimes, he would get fact checked in real time. And it was like, but it's like, dude, you have a big microphone. Think twice before you say things to that large audience that's impressionable, that relies on you for this sort of thing. And I just think that Jon Stewart had a miss there. But I will say, Jon Stewart, as much as I like a lot of his commentary in comedy, has given, he's been willing to turn a blind eye to a lot of, some people in the politics today. Like I remember when Patrick Soon-Shiong, the red-pilled billionaire owner of the Los Angeles Times, went on a show. He gave him this softball treatment and didn't really confront him at all about how Patrick Soon-Shiong is destroying the Los Angeles Times. We're in LA here, and that paper has really slid considerably under his ownership. And so Jon Stewart, I like a lot of his comedy. I like when he's holding power to account, but at times, I gotta say it. I mean, the guy does look the other way. I think if there's a friend involved.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of this challenge is these are comedians, or these are people who are not journalists, right? They're not like you or I. They're not operating in a place where they think that the intention of their program is to provide factual information. They're entertainers. And so I think that they're not going to be reliable arbiters of places that you can go to if you just want to know what do I need to understand around this issue. I mean, like you said, Rogan put RFK on his show and Elon Musk, and some of the stuff that's going on in here. It's like, sure, some of it's lighthearted and entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting to sort of get to know someone in a sort of long form conversation, right? That's very different than the short form social media clips. But if you're talking about these issues that are meaningful and weighty and that actually people's lives depend on, I do think that there's a responsibility there. Speaking of strange interviews this week, did you catch Marjorie Taylor Greene on The View? This one also caught me by surprise. She went on the show.
John's a big View viewer.
I love the women of The View. Big fan of The View.
He watches every day.
Never miss an episode. She goes on the show. You kind of expected the sort of bull in a china shop scenario here, where she's going to go in, talk about QAnon. Instead, she goes in and she says, look, Marjorie Taylor Greene says, look, friends of mine or those around me have, expected that I'm going to come in here and fight with you guys. I don't want that. I want a more civilized conversation. The hosts of the show were shocked.
Well, let's play the clip.
I've got to tell you, I'm sitting here just stumped. Because you are a very different person than I thought you were. I feel like I'm sitting next to a completely different Marjorie Taylor Greene. Why the change?
Here's where I'm at. All of this two-party fighting, you guys, you are all victims of the political industrial complex. And it's built on fundraising and fighting and toxic just garbage. And that exists all over social media, but that's not going to solve our problems in this country.
Would you say you don't believe in the QAnon conspiracies anymore?
Oh, I went over that a long time ago. I mean,
So you've changed?
Well, no, I haven't changed. I was a victim, just like you were, of media lies and stuff you read on social media.
To me, this is surprising, right? I mean, I think like the Marjorie Taylor Greene that we have long known, who has pushed really extremist views. She was a big proponent of QAnon. I mean, that was her real rise.
For a while, remember when she got elected, she was the QAnon congresswoman, right? That's how people knew her shorthand before she was Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was the QAnon congresswoman, and she had like no followers, and then started saying crazy things, and CNN and everyone else started covering her, and then her following grew, and she became this lightning rod in the conservative movement.
Right, exactly. Now she seems to be sort of walking that back a bit. Not entirely, but I think some surprising remarks. She said on the show that, your views of me may be sort of warped by social media, and that she suggested herself that she is a little bit of a victim of how social media can mischaracterize things or misinform you. And I wonder if she's sort of hinting at her past beliefs around QAnon, which is obviously nonsense. It's obviously junk. It's now 2025. Where is Q? Where are all these predictions?
What happened to the Q drops?
At some point, we probably should just come to terms with the whole Q thing was definitely a hoax, right? And she fell for it. And maybe she's realizing that in real time before us. But she has been continuing to push really hard on issues like the Epstein files, which we now don't know that Donald Trump is involved in, and his name is in the Wall Street Journal and others have done reporting on. And she continues to push really hard on this. And maybe she's becoming more aligned with those voices who she long thought were her enemies, and now starting to see
she's been swallowed by the swamp.
I guess so. Is that what's happening here? Like your enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like that now she's aligning herself with Dems or let's say more moderate Republicans.
Well, remember, she also was speaking out to some extent about ICE and the way they're conducting these raids, and saying that she wants obviously immigration laws enforced, but
this isn't the way to do it.
Yeah, and it's like.
Yeah, nobody wants to see their abuela in handcuffs, right?
It's getting, she said it was hard to watch that, they would show up in schools or with, at homecoming and arrest the dad of someone which obviously is hard to watch and it's cruel. And that's the whole point. It's to be intentionally cruel and send a message. But it's remarkable watching her take more mature positions, I guess, in public. She's the one that she was elected taking very radical and extreme positions and going to combat with the left and, being very aggressive in doing so. And now she's on The View saying, I don't want to be aggressive. I don't want to fight with you. I think we have a responsibility as the nation's fractured to try sewing it up together, as women. And that's the message she delivered on The View, which is just totally different than what she was doing a few years ago. She seems to be, to some extent, it's too early to tell, but almost maturing before her eyes. I don't want to give her too much credit because she still clearly harbors pretty extreme views on various issues. But I guess she deserves some credit for not, for refusing to play to this media environment that wants that conflict and saying, I don't want to fight with you all. I want to have a conversation that's civil.
Right. The social media algorithms reward that kind of hysterical, reaction. So if she goes on the show and tries to bring it to the ladies, that would probably do great for her. But she seems to sort of be above that now, or I don't know, striking this sort of maverick tone. And maybe that is a strong message for her. There's got to be a good political reason for this.
Okay. Maybe she wants a Netflix deal.
Maybe we do. Maybe she does too. Speaking of Netflix, some really interesting news.
You like that segue? That was a beautiful segue.
I did. Thank you.
I'm weaving like Donald Trump now.
That helped us move on. So Netflix this week, there's been some reporting that Netflix is really interested in getting into podcasts now. sending out offers to the big talent agencies, looking for dozens of podcasters that they want to bring on board to Netflix, put them in the walled garden, and make them the video exclusive home on their platform. No more YouTube. You're not going to be able to go on there if they get their way. I think this is obviously an attempt by them to go after their biggest rival in the living room, which is YouTube these days. Contrary to, what we've always known about television with cable and even streaming, it's YouTube now. And they also are looking to make a deal now with SiriusXM, which has some of the biggest podcast hosts in the country, to bring their hosts onto the platform. This is a pretty big moment, I think. I think this could be transformative. We haven't seen anything like this before in the streaming space. What do you think? What do you make of this?
A couple of things. I think one, to some extent, it's a subtle diss to all the other traditional media companies, because by going after YouTube, Netflix is effectively saying, we're not really worried about Paramount. We're not really worried about, Warner. Our big rival, we're in the big leagues with big tech. Our big rival's YouTube. That's what it's really saying, I think. And so, I thought that was interesting. But it's also interesting that the fact is that Warner and, at least right now on Paramount, it doesn't feel like these studios, these old school studios, have the muscle to take on the big schoolyard bully, which is Google, and the amount of control they have over the distribution of information and also entertainment. And Netflix is saying, you know what? We think we can maybe take these guys on, and we're gonna go right after YouTube, and we're gonna maybe try stealing some of these creators who are on the platform and driving real viewership on YouTube. People leave this stuff on for hours and try to get them exclusive for our platform.
Yeah, I think it's also a play for Netflix in that, like you said, they've already conquered much of the, let's say, long form studio and television business to compete against, the big boys in the arena, the Paramounts and the Warner Brothers. They've already conquered that. But I think they're also looking for ways to shore up the platform and to ensure people are continuing to stay there and not leave there. They already have what is believed to be the lowest churn in the industry, around 2%, meaning people who cancel. This is a great way for them to be topical and interesting and bring new people in for very little money, right? They're not going to produce any of these shows. They're already being done. It's just, here's some bucks.
Well, we'll see how much money they're paying out.
Well,
they might have to pay a lot of money to get YouTubers to leave YouTube.
But is that even a smart move? I think about the Joe Rogan play to Spotify, which brought him in their garden. He was exclusive there. You couldn't listen to Rogan anywhere else. But then we saw that deal come to an end, and it felt like both Spotify and Rogan realized that this is not the best way forward here.
I don't know. Joe Rogan made a lot of money. And I think when there's a big, bag of cash right in front of you that's guaranteed, I think that's very hard to turn down. It's the bird in the hand. And usually people opt for that versus the possibility to make maybe a little bit more money if they just hold on. Lump sum of money of cash up front. That is, I think, a hard thing to turn down. I think also that Spotify is different. Netflix is in most American homes. It's kind of like cable of yesteryear, right? It's in basically, everyone everyone seems to have a Netflix subscription, right? And so if you're, let's just say Alex Cooper, and Netflix wants to throw a big pile of cash at you, and they're saying, we're going to put you at the top of the algorithm, and that's where, tens of millions of people turn to for entertainment, and we want to be a big player in this. I think that's pretty hard to turn down. And I'm interested. And I think for Netflix, it's also, their business model is also evolving, right? And so now that they're making a lot of money off ads,
right?
If you have a lengthy, podcast, you can fit a lot of ad breaks in there.
Right. These are long shows. They're 1 to 2, 3 hours long. They're kind of lean back shows where you could turn them on and kind of just get things done around the house. It's almost like a friend is continuing to talk in the background.
And we see Netflix continue to play up to advertisers. This week they changed a key metric. So they're no longer telling advertisers how many users are watching the content, but how many people in the household. So total viewership. So you might have one Netflix account, but your family might be watching one show. So they're now saying, well, instead of saying one user is watching, it's actually 4 people watching.
194 million, they said this week.
And that's specifically to cater to advertisers who want to know what their actual reach is. And so, if you are building the advertising business, having these topical shows that are cheap to produce, that can fit a lot of ad breaks, one season of Nobody Wants This is, let's say, how many hours is that? Like 4 hours?
Sure.
Or something?
Yeah.
That's about the same amount of ad breaks you can fit in for like one lengthy podcast.
Right.
And it's way cheaper to produce that podcast, and it gets a lot of views. And so I think it makes sense from a business model like on Netflix. And it's also taking away potential viewership from YouTube, which is its biggest rival right now for at least the living room.
Is this a good time to announce that we're going to Netflix?
That's why we have this beautiful podcast space. We are in LA now because we have that Hollywood Netflix money.
Yeah. Thank you, Ted Sarandos. It's a big moment for us.
Don't forget Greg Peters. We appreciate Greg Peters as well.
How could I possibly forget? No, I'm joking. We're not doing anything like that. But
no Netflix for us.
No, I mean, are you ready to sell out for Netflix dollars?
What would be interesting though is if at some point Netflix allows people to upload their content for free, just like we upload to YouTube and we upload to iTunes, or not iTunes, but Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and at some point, it'd be interesting if they just allow user-generated content to go. I doubt that we're anywhere near that, but that would also be interesting. I don't really see.
I mean, that's the beast they're up against. I mean, that's the sort of like really big challenge that they're sort of salmon streaming upstream in, which is like forever, YouTube has developed this very social platform where anybody can become a star one day or provide something that's really niche. Like we like a lot of niche shows on YouTube.
We do.
And those shows might make their way onto a platform like Netflix, or they might not. And they might have a very small audience, but that's what makes YouTube such a compelling platform is depending on your mood, depending on what you're into, like you can find the weirdest crap imaginable and also some mainstream stuff. So I'm really interested to see who Netflix gets here. I think that's going to say a lot about their plans and where this all goes.
And can Netflix disrupted the entire, traditional legacy studio space and entertainment space. Can they be a disruptor now on the tech space?
All right. Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you for listening to Power Lines. Oliver, I hope we make it back home out of here.
Yeah, we hope to be back in our regular studio space next week. Although, I'm kind of liking this space.
Air traffic controllers, if you're out there, if you're listening, we really hope that you can stay on the job. A lot of us are counting on you.
Please green light flights out of Fresno and into New York.
All right. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you for listening to Power Lines, a presentation of Status, and a special thank you to Beehive for sponsoring this episode. The show is produced by Matt Havia and Antonio Enriquez in association with In the Arena Studios. Please like, share, and subscribe to Power Lines on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen, and watch full episodes and clips on our YouTube page at Status.